Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and the people that made them and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Learhoff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. In channel surfing a few months ago, I came across a couple of fine examples of late 40s and early 50s noir, both of which starred MGM's Ricardo Montalban. I enjoyed these films so much I decided to contact one of my all-time favorite film historians to discuss them. As our guest tonight, again, we welcome back the host of TCM's wonderful Noir Alley and a true expert in his field, Mr. Eddie Muller. Hi, Eddie.
Hello, Steve. It's good to be back on
Good.
a Saturday night. Saturday night. Every night is Saturday night. That's my night, right?
You
So
know,
that's Noir Alley on Saturday.
I don't know about you, but I have fond memories of being a kid living in LA, and my parents would go out and I would be home alone. And I found great comfort in finding an old movie on television. There used to, I think it was, you were Bay Area, right?
Yes, up in the Northern California. Yeah.
So did you have CBS's late movie called The Fabulous 52?
No,
Okay, so we had
we
something down.
certainly had our variations on that, but not
Sure.
that
And there was $1 Million Movie. Did you
million
have that?
dollar movie. I would movies till dawn and dialing for dollars and all that. Yes, I that was the genesis of my cinephilia, if you will, was watching all those things on television with commercials, mind you.
Oh God, yeah. Did you have a
Um,
guy who would sit there in a chair and talk about the movie in between segments? Did you have one of
well,
those
that
guys?
was the whole point of dialing for dollars. That's
Oh,
right. He was going to call random people on the phone and see if they were watching. What's the count and the amount? And then, of course, late at night, it was we had a guy, Jay Brown was the host, and he was a strange dude. It was Jay Brown and his night people, and I think he had a lot of people who watched in prison. you know, I just really I love Jay Brown. I first saw Detour, that great noir,
right.
late at night, with Jay Brown as the host. So
And we had all the car guys, Cal Worthington, Ralph Williams, and his dog Spot. It's the big deal down here. And it's interesting, all those movie channels, all those things have gone. They've been replaced by, commercial-free streaming. But there's something very kind of nostalgic about those old movies and late night with all the commercials. Now, I think I mentioned to you, I've come across this channel. I don't know if you have it up there. It sounds like it's a syndicated channel. It's called Movies.
yes, I know what you're talking about.
You know about it. It's through KCOP Channel 13 in LA. And a friend of mine in Colorado says you got to watch these movies. Even though they run 9,000 commercials, they run them uncut. And they're running a lot of 1950s noir.
Hmm.
So I now record a lot of the movies because I have a kind of a big gap in my film knowledge, which has certainly been helped by you in terms of noir, because I'm great on war movies, I'm great on James Bond movies, I'm great on science fiction movies of the 50s, but I'm gradually learning noir film by film. And I loved our conversation a couple years ago when we talked about the Asphalt Jungle and the Killers. And once I saw these two Montalban movies, I say, I don't know anything about these movies whatsoever. I got to call Eddie. And that's kind of where we're here, why we're here. I have to ask you, by the way, I'm curious how you answer this question because a lot of people uh, who aren't really film buffs per se, I call them civilians. They wonder how I can watch a movie more than once. Why would you want to go back to the well and see a movie a second time? Now, of course, I've blown past that considerably over the years. What do you tell people about your interest in seeing movies again and again?
Well, if the movie is really good, I mean, I'm a storyteller, right? That's actually what I consider myself to be, is like a storyteller in whatever medium it might be. And as a storyteller, when I see a great movie, I'm very curious about how it was made and what the decisions were made by the writer and the director and actors. I'm obsessed with trying to figure out what their decision making process was. And so that's why I will watch a movie that I enjoy very much and respect very much, and I can watch it repeatedly. I would dare to say that more um, people of my generation learned about making movies from repeatedly watching Alfred Hitchcock films, especially Psycho, which is a textbook in how you generate suspense and how you direct and misdirect an audience and get them to think what you want them to think at the time you want them to think it. Psycho is like a master class in that. The other reason I watch movies multiple times is because it's a different experience depending on where you are in your life when you watch the movie, right? I mean, my favorite film of all time is Nick Ray's In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham. And one of the reasons that's my favorite film of all time is because I saw it for the first time when I was a teenager, and it means something different to me every time I watch the movie because it changes as I mature. And as I get older, I see different things or I react differently to the relationships of the characters in the film because I've changed. So the movie has sort of changed with me, or my perceptions change. So I find great value in that.
It's interesting. There's a lot of talk about the nature of Hollywood today and the movie business. There's a lot of talk about we've kind of lost our storytelling ability. The studios are trapped in this repeating the same formulas over and over again. Batman 6, Superman 10, Iron Man 5, and I find myself looking backward more than ever.
Mhm.
I am a constant surfer. I'm constantly looking for a good movie because for some people. They find comfort in alcohol or heroin or, whatever their passion or advice is. I find for me, in addition to Major League Baseball, I'm a big baseball fan, so I find it to be a balm. Watching an old movie is, especially an old movie I've seen before, is like visiting old friends, seeing old friends. And I equate it to Shakespearean scholars who will, read
Mhm.
Shakespeare over and over again, and you ask them why, they're going to give you the same answers we give. So, I was curious about that, and it's just nice to talk to someone who values the film experience as much as I do, and so knowledgeable. I am going to, for those of us who are watching on YouTube, I am going to put up a poster to start this thing, and I put up the poster for, well, at least actually the title treatment's not the poster
There
for
it
Border
is.
Incident. Now, Border Incident, I simply recorded on that movies channel because I saw Ricardo Montalban's name, and I saw George Murphy's name, and I said that sounds interesting. Now, my knowledge of Ricardo Montalban is very limited. I saw him in the 1949 World War II classic Battleground, which
Mhm.
is a favorite, and then I saw him 40 years later in Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. So there's a fairly large
Yeah,
gap between those movies. Now, I think you told me that you actually got to spend some time with Ricardo.
I did. He was a guest at one of my earliest film noir festivals in Hollywood. I honestly can't remember what year it was or what number the festival was. This year will be my 27th year doing that festival in Hollywood. I predate the TCM festival by more than a decade, right? So I've been doing this a little while. Yes, and we had Ricardo come out, and honestly, it's hard for me to call him Ricardo because he struck me so much as Mr. Montalban. He was so dignified, and he was. I'm not joking when I say this. I think he probably was my favorite interview that I've ever done live before an audience. Just because of how noble he was. He was a man who projected an incredible nobility about him, and it was an eye opener. Very much, I can tell in the way you're describing coming across Border Incident and seeing him and saying, there was this gap in my knowledge of Ricardo Montalban. Um, I felt very much the same way. I grew up with him as a TV actor primarily. You'd see him as a guest star on things, which was the case with a lot of people in the movies that I love, the older films. They end up on TV. Audrey Totter is suddenly working on Medical Center, and people are guest starring on the FBI and all this kind of stuff. And that was sort of my introduction to Ricardo Montalban. And then, of course, he did the Chrysler commercials, the TV commercials, and he was on Fantasy Island, of course. That was
There
his
was
big show later.
just the way he said Corinthian leather. I think we all
Fine
remember that.
Corinthian leather, yeah. And even that, which I wasn't playing it off as a joke or anything, but I did bring that up. I said, and where does fine Corinthian leather fit in your career retrospective? And he gave the most um, emotional answer to that, because he said, "I'll tell you how it fit in. Um, I am a Mexican representing the ultimate American product." He said, "I'm representing, automobiles from Detroit." He said this was the epitome of America, was a luxury automobile. And the fact that they chose me to be the spokesman for the company and to sell these cars was a huge honor to him. He took it very, very seriously. And he also took very seriously, I'm sorry if I'm getting us off track on this, but this does really apply to Border Incident. He also took very, very seriously his ethnicity, and that he wanted everybody to know that he was Mexican and not Venezuelan and not Cuban and not generic South American. He says, "I am from Mexico. That's where I was born. I'm proud to, Viva Mexico,
Via Mexico. Now, this movie could be filmed tomorrow. I mean, this is a movie from 1949, which let's see, that's 70
It's like
that's
75 years
77
ago or more.
77 years ago.
77 years ago. Yeah.
So, and yet the story is as fresh as it can be. I mean, it's about the braceros who were workers in the California fruit fields. Some had to cross illegally, and they were being killed by these vicious traffickers. And I found it immediately interesting and almost documentary like to begin with. What can you tell us about Border Incident? Obviously, it's an Anthony Mann film, and that's a pretty big pedigree right away.
Yes. Well, what's interesting about it, many things. It's part of a series of films, noir films, but noir films made with the cooperation of the government. Because this became a very popular thing in the immediate post-war years. I think Fox Studios sort of started it, where they got the cooperation of the FBI to make a couple of movies, and the FBI wanted to use Hollywood as a propaganda tool to show people, like, this is how great we are at fighting crime. Don't even think about committing a crime, because look at all of our surveillance equipment and we have all this stuff. We're going to catch you. And so they, at one point, once Fox made that a viable thing, like this semi-documentary crime stories, and semi-documentary is kind of a misnomer. It just means it's shot on location. These are not documentary films in the least, right? But they chose to. It was a short way of declaring the film had authenticity, right? Anthony Mann did this picture called T-Men that was released through Eagle Lion, and that was about treasury agents, and they were busting up a counterfeiting racket, and that movie was a big surprise hit for Eagle Lion, and was like a sleeper. Like Poverty Row Studios, Eagle Lion was a little cut above Poverty Row, but still not a major. And the film was so successful that it sort of unleashed a whole bunch of these movies. Now, the fact that Border Incident was made at MGM is really kind of interesting because it is not in any way the kind of project that MGM would have made normally. They stayed away from material like this. Louis B. Mayer did not like crime movies. He hated The Asphalt Jungle, which is only the greatest crime movie ever made in America. He
Agreed.
hated it. We've talked about that before. But that's because after Howard Hughes took over RKO, Dory Sherry, who was the head of production at RKO, left there. He would not work for Howard Hughes, and he ended up becoming head of production at MGM. And that's how this project ended up at MGM, because Mann had been at RKO. This project was being developed originally at RKO, and then it traveled over to MGM with Dory Sherry, and that's how it got made there. And Anthony Mann, of course, got to keep his favorite cinematographer, John Alton, to shoot this film, which is part of the reason it's as good as it is.
Well, Mr. Montalban, again, I had very little knowledge of him. Last time I saw him, he was wearing a GI uniform in the Battle of the Bulge, and he plays I guess he's a Mexican anti-drug trafficking agent working
Yes,
with the
yes.
U.S. And he's just terrific. Do you remember Montalban talking a little bit about his MGM days? Did he regard that period fondly? Was he being treated well?
Um, my experience with most of the actors from that era is they they did not want to bite the hand that fed them in any way. They were very, very grateful and gracious about their success and that they got a great career out of it. But they did have, nagging issues with the studio system and the way they were treated. And I clearly remember Montalban saying that if there was one thing that really bugged him was that Hollywood treated Hispanics in such a generic way, right? Like he said, I never got to play a Mexican. And in fact, the way he described it, he said, they didn't want me to say I was a Mexican. He said there was a stigma to saying that, to saying, oh, he's a Mexican. He said they wanted me to say I was from Cuba or I was from Venezuela or, anything except a lowly Mexican. That's the way he would put it. And he said, and I just hated that. So he loved making this film because he got to be a Mexican, right? I mean that, and he brought a great dignity to the role, and he's terrific in it. I'm trying to remember in he did another great noir at this same time called Mystery Street. I don't know.
Which is the next film I want to talk about. I want to talk about that one because that one almost blew me away in terms of the suspense. But I just wanted to bring up a couple other points about this one. Well, let's talk a little bit about Anthony Mann for a second because I certainly know Anthony Mann from his Jimmy Stewart westerns,
Right.
and he certainly cut a big swath with those films. Anthony Mann is a very, very storied director, a very well touted director. Did he do much noir?
He did. That's kind of where he got his start.
He
I mean,
did.
in the 1940s, he directed a lot of B films. Trying to remember where most of them were made, but he bounced around. He did a wonderful film at Paramount called Dr. Broadway
Hmm.
in like 1942 or 43, where when you watch that, it's a real B film. It was supposed to be like a pilot for a film series called Dr. Broadway, where McDonald Carey was playing a physician like in the heart of Times Square, and he was getting mixed up with all kinds of crooks, and it was a very Damon Runyon type of thing. Uh, and boy, you can see Anthony Mann's style emerging already. Such an incredible sense of composition and movement, and how he would use the camera. And uh, and yeah, he gravitated immediately to crime films, stuff like Railroaded and Desperate. Those were like the first films where Anthony Mann really emerged as a as I don't like to use the word auteur, but in Anthony Mann's case, I mean, he is kind of, um, he didn't write his films, but he had a certain affinity for these subjects, and his attack, as I like to say, of a story fit really well. And so those westerns, those are kind of noir films. I mean, tortured protagonists, they're men on a quest, they've got something haunting them in their past. Very, very noir, which is why a lot of people think that all those Jimmy Stewart westerns in the 50s are like a natural extension of Anthony Mann's noir films,
Sure, sure.
T-Men and Raw Deal and Border Incident and Side Street. Really, really terrific films. He did one film. I don't know if you've ever seen this, called has a couple of different titles: Reign of Terror, and it's also called The Black Book.
Hmm.
It was made in, I think, 49. Also photographed by John Alton, and it's the French Revolution as a film noir.
Oh, wow.
It's a gangster picture, is basically what it is. But it's the
There
French
you go.
Revolution, and there's Robespierre and Cardinal Richelieu and all this, and it was an amazing film, and it just shows. That's what I mean by he was like an auteur. It didn't matter what the story was; he was taking his style and his approach wherever he went.
Now, Montalban is joined in the border incident by George Murphy, our future U.S. Senator. And I had just seen, I mean, George Murphy was kind of a MGM song and dance guy.
Lightweight, a
I
lightweight.
just saw him with Shirley Temple the other day in a Little Miss Broadway. And this is serious drama, and I won't spoil it for the fans who haven't seen this, but what happens to George Murphy in this movie is pretty gripping.
As I always like to say, it's harrowing.
And
People who've seen the movie get my little pun there, but
oh yeah.
um, yes, and George Murphy is great in the film, and that particular scene is probably the most intense scene of violence in any noir film ever.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I mean it's if you believe it, everybody, you're in for an interesting roller coaster ride with this picture. And then for those of us who you can see us on YouTube or True TV Plus, he's standing behind him is the great Alfonso Bedoya,
Alfonso
who is
Bedoya.
a year past playing the bandit chief and treasurer of the Sierra Madre, which I also think has a little noir, even
Oh
though it's
yeah,
an outdoor
definitely. That's
picture.
a lot of people give that one honorary noir status.
Status, exactly, exactly. Um, it's funny. I heard a story once about Alfonso Bedoya. His one of his features, especially as the gold hat guy and treasurer of Sierra Madre, is his teeth. His teeth are all crooked and messed up, and it gives him kind of a sinister feel. I heard a story that he had them all fixed, and then after he had them all fixed, he couldn't get any work.
Couldn't get any work. Yeah, they wanted the teeth. They
They
wanted.
wanted those that they
That's
wanted
funny.
that too.
I have crooked teeth, and I always thought like I'll never get a gig on TCM because my teeth are crooked. There's no way a guy can be on TV with crooked
Well,
teeth.
your teeth are in your knowledge, buddy.
Thank you. And
Um,
George Murphy, we also have to, depending on your point of view, you can credit him or blame him for teaching Ronald Reagan everything he knew, because George Murphy was Ronald Reagan's mentor as a politician. I mean, and that was basically it. Reagan just followed everything that George Murphy did, first at the Screen Actors Guild and then in California politics, and he took it all the way. George Murphy didn't get nearly as far as Reagan got with that act.
one of the things I love about catching these films from the 50s is finding people in them that you know from other films. And I'm a big Arthur Honegger fan.
Oh
And
yeah,
interestingly, in this movie, Arthur Honeycutt, who's always playing a pretty good guy, it's a terrible picture of him. I'm sorry it's out of focus, but he plays a bad guy.
yeah.
Arthur Honeycutt, who was Davy Crockett in The Last Command. I mean, and he's done some wonderful movies over the years. I'm sure you know the film. It's another one of my favorite. It's a Dick Powell film called Split
Split
Second.
Second. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's the guy
he's in
with the
that one too.
mule.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah,
good little picture. And
yeah.
then
That is a good movie.
the other person in the movie I noticed, let's see if I can pop him up here. Um, let's
Oh, their
see.
heads are cut off, but there's Charles McGraw and Howard Da Silva.
Thank you. Thank you. See, you knew who they were. You only needed to see half their heads.
Well, that photograph is in my book, Dark City: The Lost World of Film Noir.
Okay.
That photo, that exact photo. I can't remember the name of the woman there who plays. I think she's Howard Da Silva's wife in the movie, and
Right, right,
I
exactly.
can't remember the actress's name at the
And
moment.
of course, I know Charles
Charles McGraw, yeah,
From Spartacus.
of course, yeah,
Plays.
Slave, yeah. But he was in a ton of noir films.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, there's just these faces that keep popping up, and so I watched Border Incident, which is terrific, and I can't say enough about it. And then I noticed that there's a movie on afterwards called Mystery Street. And again, I looked at the cast: Montalban, Marshall Thompson. I said, well, this is interesting. And this is a John Sturges film. Now, I know John Sturges really well. I got a chance to interview him back in the 70s because I did a chapter in my combat films book on The Great Escape, and I spent a lot of time with John making sure I got the behind the scenes history. And Sturges has a wonderful resume and certainly uh, started his career pretty much at MGM.
yes, and yeah, I mean he one of the I mean actually both of these directors we're talking about I think are still kind of underrated filmmakers. I mean Sturgis has a lot of classic films to his credit that were so commercially successful, like The Great Escape and stuff like that. And didn't John Sturges do The Magnificent Seven? Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's what I mean. It's almost like these movies are too good. Like they're studio concoctions or something, and he doesn't get the credit for being. He's like a Richard Fleischer, is another director who just became such a reliable A-list director for big Hollywood movies that they don't think of them the way people think of Howard Hawks or somebody like that, who's like an auteur. But these guys, man, they could make great
Well,
movies.
the same thing applies to Robert Wise. Robert Wise makes a
Oh,
lot of great movies, and you never hear him mention when they talk about the great numbers of Hollywood. I mean, Sturgis, over the years, I've come to appreciate one of his finest qualities is casting. He was known for putting together just great casts, and and his action directing is always very solid. Now, this movie kind of snuck up on me. It's kind of it starts fairly low key, and I'll pull her up real quickly. I think I have a nice picture of Jan
Jen
Sterling.
Sterling. Yeah,
Jan
yeah. There you go. Yeah.
so this is pre Ace in the Hole, pre High and the Mighty Jan Sterling, um, and it's she's kind of like I won't give too much away, but she's
No,
kind
you.
of
She's
like
not in the picture very long.
well, she's kind of like the Janet Leigh character in Psycho. I mean, she's right there, and she's kind of a party girl, and she's has some issues with her boyfriend, and here he can be seen with Marshall Thompson. Also, Marshall, like Montalban, Marshall Thompson was in Battleground that year. So, and Marshall Thompson is kind of it's kind of like a minor league Jimmy Stewart, kind of the innocent everyman guy who people take
Hmm?
advantage of. And I've always liked Marshall Thompson. Of course, in the 60s, I was riveted to my TV set every week watching him in Doctari
Oh
in
yeah,
Africa.
Doctari. Yeah, yeah.
But Marshall had a very eclectic career, and Jan Sterling certainly became a major force. Would you consider her in one of your femme fatale book type things? Would you consider her a femme fatale or not?
I profiled her in Dark City Dames
Oh, yeah.
in the new edition. So
Okay.
she's one of 10 actresses that I added to the new edition, and I really really enjoyed writing her profile because she's so different than what you expect based on her film performances. But in fact, I got a kick out of it because I did something kind of unusual in writing that profile. Is I wrote the first few paragraphs are not about her; they're about the character she plays in film noir, which she played the same woman in all of these movies, in Union Station and Mystery Street and Ace in the Hole, and there's another one I'm slipping my mind right now, but she always played Caged. She's great in Caged as one of the women in the cell block, and so I wrote this profile that was basically the life story of all those characters. And then I said, that's not Jan Sterling, but that's the character she played in every film noir
She's
movie.
she's always playing a hard-edged dame. She's
A little ditzy, but tough, man, knocked around from a young age. And, she somehow managed to keep a little bit of a sense of humor always, even though it was a tough life. But she wasn't like that at all. She was a real blue blood, man. She came from affluence and she went to finishing school, and she grew up in England and lived in Argentina for a while. And her parents did not want her to become an actor, and she talked them into letting her move to New York for like a month. I'm going to go for a month, and if I haven't made it in a month, I'll come home, and it's like, are you kidding me? A month. And she did it. She did it. She actually
it's
got a gig, in New York in the theater, totally by accident, just by being herself, standing in the lobby of
you
the
want you
Shubert
wonder
Theater or something.
you wonder if that's done anymore, given that there's probably 10,000 more people who want to do that and probably 10,000 less jobs. And and of course the cost of living back in 1948 or whatever was not what it is today. I don't think well, we're dealing with that in every city. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, she was great. And as you point out, she's not in the movie very much. She's she
But she
basically
she is terrific, and I had the pleasure of interviewing her as well
oh,
later on.
fabulous.
She appeared with several movies that I showed. It was a little difficult. I've done this for so long, Steve, that I've interviewed people and then said I don't want to interview them again. Not just because it was apparent to me that they were mentally not all there, right? And so the first time Jan came out and did something, she was adorable. She was really funny, very emotional. She was married to Paul Douglas, the actor, and in fact, discovered him dead on the floor of their home. And when she was telling that, she just like broke down. She just broke down crying and said,
Yeah,
I've never gotten over it. I mean, he was the love of my life. I've never gotten over it.
he had just done a Twilight Zone episode
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
about the baseball manager, and I also read somewhere that he was paged by Billy Wilder to play the Fred McMurray role in The Apartment, and that was killed by obviously his death.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, the trauma of finding your husband dead is,
Oh my gosh. But
um,
then sadly she came back a year later, and there was a precipitous decline. Like she clearly was starting the long Alzheimer's road.
sure, sure, no,
So that's always been a little tricky when you want to give these people a last hurrah, but you also don't want to embarrass them in public.
yeah,
And
I know exactly what you're talking about. I got a chance to talk to Kirk Douglas. One of the last things he did, because I was doing a retrospective article on Lonely Are the Brave for Cinema Retro. And it was difficult because he still had the stroke symptoms,
Right.
but he was so enthusiastic about that movie, which he considered his favorite. So I did get some good quotes out of it. And I brought my poster with me, and he signed it. He said, "Dear Steve, I used to be a movie star. Best Kirk Douglas," and that's a prized part of my
Wow.
collection. What a force
That's
of it.
something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so getting back to Mystery Street, there's an interesting cast here. I found noticing some people that I was a little surprised. I want to bring up a photo real quickly of. I noticed that well, we have two ladies, Sally Forrest, and interestingly, Betsy Blair.
Yeah. Betsy Blair. Yeah.
The only thing I'd ever seen Betsy Blair in was playing Marty's girlfriend in
Right.
Marty
Right.
5 years later. But she's playing a friend of Sally Forrest is married to Marshall Thompson's character, and when Marshall Thompson is accused of a murder, she's trying to come to his rescue. What do we know about Sally Forrest? I didn't know too much
She was
about
a
her.
dancer primarily. And she did a lot of work with Ida Lupino. She was a favorite of Ida Lupino. So
Oh,
she was in a number of her films. And it when I first saw her, like in this film, I was like, oh, well, not everybody can be great. But but she has really grown on me over the years. And now it's like I will watch anything that Sally Forrest is in. She was just I just showed on Noir Alley a film from 1951 called The Strip with Mickey Rooney. He plays a jazz drummer, and
I
she's
just saw that myself. Well, I think I saw it on Noir Alley. No,
oh, there you go. And
absolutely.
and and Sally Forrest is the cigarette girl, the dancing cigarette girl,
Who
and
wants to get the
she's
chance?
terrific.
She wants to get the chance to sing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And she's really, really good in the film, and her dance numbers are great. I think they were choreographed by Nick Castle, and she's just great. She holds
Oh,
the screen very well.
oh, sure, sure. The other person I wanted to bring up was another actor who had was known for being well, I know him from Humphrey Bogart's Sahara,
Oh,
Bruce
Bruce Bennett.
Bennett.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this Mystery Street, is that Ricardo plays a detective based in Cape Cod area, and he's tasked with finding who murdered what essentially all they found was a skeleton. And he ends up going to the Harvard campus and meets a forensic professor who can examine evidence. I thought that whole aspect of the story was quite interesting, especially in 1950 when we're
Yeah,
not,
it's a CSI episode in 1950. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And that aspect of the story was interesting and kind of clue by clue leads them to find the actual murderer. And I thought Bruce was very good in that. Of course, he had also, like Alfonso Bedoya, had just done Treasure of Sierra Madre,
Yeah.
playing the unfortunate, um, I guess, the unfortunate gold digger, or not gold digger, but gold hunter who.
Gold Hunter. Yeah.
Yes, there's something very wistful about the demise of his character, because something happens to Tim Holt when he's hearing the story,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the way that I think, yeah, Max Steiner, the way he brings in that music of just kind of some ethereal music about uh, peach picking, the way it plays in the background. I always thought that was kind of interesting. And of course, when the end of the movie, Tim Holt decides he wants to go back to Texas and find the widow, and I love that. But this movie was again, for those of you who haven't seen Mystery Street, it's really a compelling story. And Montalban, and I'm going to bring up another nice shot of him, a nice
And
portrait,
it's a script by Richard Brooks,
Richard
who was
Brooks.
the created the base. And I believe they really played up the fact that they shot that film on location at Harvard. And I think the film was originally called Murder at Harvard Square.
Oh,
I think was the original title of the film, which they changed to the very generic Mystery Street. And the film is also really interesting to me because abortion plays a part in that script, right?
right.
And that just wasn't at all That was taboo, totally off limits for the production code administration. You can't do that. But they somehow, they're walking on eggshells in the script talking about it, but it's obvious that that's what Jan Sterling is doing in the beginning of the film. Is she's trying to strong arm this guy into giving her money for an abortion.
Abortion.
That's what triggers the whole plot, which is pretty ahead of its time.
Very much ahead of its time, and just so much of a plus. I can't recommend this movie enough. Now, in the remaining time, I wanted to bring up another film. Since I have you here, you're my captive audience. I wanted to bring up a movie, and I'm going to miss some of the title because unfortunately the background in this program doesn't allow the full screen. But I just got through watching Broderick Crawford in The Mob. And another, now this is Broderick Crawford. This is 50 also, and he has just won the Academy Award for Best Actor in All the King's Men. And I don't know if he may have made this before All the King's Men came out, but this is an early look at a mob influence on the docks. It happens to be another interesting story. Do you know much about this one, Eddie?
I don't know what the genesis of it was. I know that the screenplay is by William Bowers, who is one of my favorite screenwriters of that
Oh,
era. He was a ex newspaper man who was incredibly facile in his work, and he had a great wit about him. They would often hire Bill Bowers to come in and write the final polish on a script because he was so good at writing dialogue. They would say, it just needs a little something. And so Bowers was the guy who came in and spiced everything up. He was the salt and pepper guy on the basic meal of the film. He would come in and make it something special. And he did that on a lot of movies, but The Mob is him the whole way. And Crawford's great in that film. It's a little bit, it predates On the Waterfront, and it has a lot of the same stuff going on in that film as On the Waterfront, except this is a cop movie. Is a
right. For those of you who don't know the film, Broderick Crawford plays an undercover cop who has to infiltrate a mob operation that indeed has taken over the waterfront. And some very interesting little things happen in this movie. There's one point toward the end of the movie, they're trailing the bad guy, and they've monkeyed around with something underneath the car, and it's allowing the car to drip phosphorescent paint. So they can follow the car by shining a spotlight on the roadway. And I thought that was very cool. But the machinery to get that moving, of course, this is 1950. Today we have GPS, which gets you everywhere, and everybody. I mean, of course, the idea of attaching a homing device goes back to, for my money, Goldfinger, with James Bond chasing
yeah.
Goldfinger's Rolls Royce with a little electronic device he shoves up into the hood, the boot of the car. But this was a lot of machinery to get this little phosphorescent stuff. And Crawford was always good. I kind of grew up with that gravelly voice on Highway Patrol,
Yeah.
and yet he's done so many other films, etc.
Well,
So
he had a period there. This film was in the middle of it, and he'd been around Hollywood for a while, like all during the 1940s. But it wasn't until he did All the King's Men that was the breakout. Because guys that look like that don't get the lead role very often. So it was terrific and he was great in that film. But he had a few years there where he was like the star. And of course, we were just talking a minute ago about Paul Douglas. And Paul Douglas, when they made the movie version of Born Yesterday, that was supposed to be Paul Douglas and Jan Sterling because they had done it on stage.
oh,
They had been in that play separately and together for like 6 or 7 years. And they were kind of stunned when Columbia went a different way. And obviously they cast Broderick Crawford because of the success of All the King's Men, and so Paul Douglas was out, and then that left the door open for Judy Holliday to come in and take the role that in some ways Jan Sterling was born to play, really.
Yeah.
But you can't say that Judy Holliday didn't get everything out of that performance. She was
No,
great.
that what a unique presence, definitely. I often wonder if she was ever considered for the role of that Gene Hagen played in Singing in the Rain. I think that
Yeah,
that would have been a good fit for her as well. Although Gene Hagen
Gene
was
Hagen's fantastic in that film,
fantastic.
but you couldn't go wrong with either of them. You know,
Exactly, exactly.
and Jan Sterling would have been good in that part as well.
Well, I always remember her in a movie I've seen so many times, and it's a favorite of mine, which is The High and the Mighty. And
Yeah.
she's part of the ensemble, and she's terrific. And I always remember that amazing moment where she's taking off her makeup because she doesn't want to doesn't want to just show off herself anymore. She wants to show her potential boyfriend her real self, and I think it's the actor Flaherty. I think maybe his character was Flaherty, but. I forget the name of the
I'm
actor.
drawing a blank. I remember.
Yeah.
I certainly remember Claire Trevor in
Yes.
that film. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Warner Brothers put some money into acquiring the rights, and certainly getting Bill Wellman to direct was a big deal. And of course, John Wayne wasn't supposed to play the co-pilot; it was supposed to be Spencer Tracy, and they couldn't get Spencer Tracy, so Wayne stepped in. And Wayne's company was producing. They didn't have a lot of money for actors after that, so they brought in kind of a little bit of a, I won't say a B team, but more like an A- team of actors. Maybe
Yeah.
B team is right, maybe B plus. But a lot of those actors did wonderful performances. I had Karen Kramer on my show, and she was the ingenue in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And told me a little bit about that. It's so funny. So
Karen Sharp Kramer. Yes.
you're right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Well, as always, this has been a blast. Tell us what you're working on at the moment, aside from your wonderful show on TCM and all of your festivals.
There's a lot going on. Uh, because I was just working on it before I jumped on the call here. I have a book coming out next year called Noir Around the World
Oh,
that I am writing with my colleague Imogen Sarah Smith, who you may be familiar with. I call her the queen of the Criterion collection
ah,
because she does for Criterion what I do on TCM. She's kind of their noir specialist, and I've known Imogen for 12 or 14 years now, and and so we're co-authoring this book to just I hope it will educate people that film noir was not an exclusively American phenomenon. So we're talking about we're giving a little tour. It's actually a world tour at this mid 20th century mark where you're actually going to get to see, not see, but where we talk about films from France and Germany and Italy and Scandinavia, behind the Iron Curtain, England, Mexico, Argentina, Japan, Korea. It's and the movies are just great. So, and not all the ones that people think they know. There are some films that will come totally out of the blue for people.
I'm thinking of the famous French film with Belmondo. Breathless would consider that noir?
Totally inspired by noir. It's not a film that we talk about in the book. We reference the film numerous times in
Right.
the book, but it's almost like that was one that was a little like everybody knows that movie, I think,
Right, right, of course. Now,
so
Eddie, when
yeah.
you're compiling a book like that, I often find with my own experience, it's very key to get the right images. Are not going offshore? Is it possible to find good images?
We're working on it.
That's always
There's only two movies that at this stage are proving somewhat challenging.
because
Believe it or not, I have a film in this book from Iran.
wow.
That is a total. There were several noir films made there in the 1960s, in the early 1960s. Uh, I didn't have trouble getting those photos though. That was kind of great. That was a surprise. But there's a couple. There's also a film from Syria that we're writing about, and that one is proving Well, I don't know yet. We haven't found the good pictures yet, so we're working on it.
Well, good luck with that. Absolutely. And of course, we love your show on TCM. And when's your next festival?
Friday. I don't know when
Wow.
this is airing, but
Oh,
I mean, we're recording this now, and in 3 days I'm going down to do another festival in Hollywood, and then we do 10 of these now around the country every year,
well,
and
this will be on the air Sunday. So how long is the festival?
uh, will be it's in two parts. So there's still another long weekend after this
Oh,
airs.
well, then we'll
So
definitely promote it. And what is the name of the festival? It's called the Film Noir Festival.
it's called Noir City Hollywood,
Noir, and what's the venue?
the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh,
Same
fabulous.
place where they have a lot of the TCM festival takes place
Sure,
there.
sure. No, that's great.
Which they've done a magnificent job renovating that venue. This is my 27th year, as I think I mentioned at the
Wow.
top, doing a festival in that venue. And a few years ago, Netflix took it over, and I have to say they did a magnificent job restoring the theater and really making it a hub for cinema lovers in Hollywood. This is the mecca now, and it's and when Netflix took it over, for their own purposes and things, I'm happy to say I was one of the, I think, 3 or 4 film festivals that they kind of grandfathered in under the new regime, so that we could still do the shows there, because they've been very successful, right? 27 years, nothing to shake a stick at.
Give us a couple of highlights of films that you're looking forward to people's reaction to.
The one we just restored, it's called The Yellow Canary. And by the time this airs, that will have had its world re-premiere. It's a it's a story. It was made in the early 1960s, distributed by Fox, but independently made, and it's based on a novel by Whit Masterson, who were the two guys who wrote the original book, The Touch of Evil, is based on. And
Oh,
it's the screenplay is by Rod Serling, and it's
wow.
directed by a guy just starting his career named Buzz Kulick, who did a lot of famous TV shows, Brian's Song, and
Sure.
other stuff on TV. He did a great neo noir called Warning Shot with David Jansen.
Oh, sure, of
Uh,
course.
but the star, this is the main thing. The star is Pat Boone. Pat
Oh,
Boone, who plays a kind of nasty, pop star in this film. He's not a nice guy in the movie
and
at all.
what year was this?
Like 1963.
Wow.
And Barbara Eden plays his wife, and he's a pop star whose infant son is kidnapped and held for ransom, and you start to suspect that it's an inside job because he is very disliked by the people in his inner circle, and it's great because and both Pat and Barbara will be there for this
Oh,
re-premiere.
that's what now
So
what day is that?
that's Saturday, the 4th of April. We're showing that.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. It's interesting. Rod Serling's film career really was very spotty. I mean, a lot of his strength was in his television writing. I've always maintained that the type of writing that Rod was known for, very strong dialogue, believable characters, very talky. He was not a visual writer. He was a voice writer. And a lot of his films never got made. I was actually doing research into a war picture, the Bridge at Remagen, which was released in '69 with George Segal, and he did one of the drafts. Often see his name involved with drafts that didn't get made. I think he's also, I don't know if he's credited, but the kitschy movie in the '60s, which was released under the title, let's see, Hot Rods to Hell.
Hot Rods to Hell with Dana Andrews.
Dane
Yeah.
Andrews, I don't know if Rod is credited on that or not, but it was one of his scripts. And of course, he did what some people consider a very sloppy movie, but I find it to be kind of kitschy and fun. He did Assault on a Queen with
Yeah.
Frank
Yeah.
Sinatra and Verna Lisi, and
Yep.
it's kind of a kitschy story, but I enjoyed it. This will run on Sunday, so people can still find the festival after this Sunday.
Yes.
So
Yes,
I
absolutely.
will promote it definitely. And as always, Eddie, thank you for joining us.
Oh, just a pleasure. It's always so much fun talking with you, Steve. It's nice. I like talking to a man who likes to talk. Quote
Well,
Sidney
everybody,
Greenstreet.
we have been with the wonderful Eddie Muller. This is Saturday Night at the Movies. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a thumbs up. We'll take all the critiques we can get, positive and negative. And I always like to promote my other podcast, Tales from Hollywoodland, which I co-host with Julian Schlossberg and Arthur E. Friedman. But we always enjoy hearing from our fans, and thank you for supporting classic films. We need to preserve these films just like Eddie's doing. Thank you, Eddie.
My pleasure. Thanks. Anytime. Anytime, Steve.